She said I didn't belong there. Just stood in the middle of the lobby, blocking the elevator, clutching her oversized purse like I was about to steal it, and told me flat out, "This is a private building, sir. You need to leave." I told her I lived here. She didn't care. I told her I had a key fob. She said I probably stole it. I even showed her mail with my name and unit number on it, and she had the nerve to say, "Anyone can fake that." And before I could even finish the sentence, she was on her phone with 911. This man is trespassing. He refuses to leave. He's acting aggressive. I think he might be dangerous. The police showed up fast. Too fast. And they didn't ask questions. Didn't check IDs. Didn't verify anything. They cuffed me right there in my own building's lobby. The same one I paid for. Renovated. Maintained. The one I own. But that wasn't the end. That was the beginning of the worst day of her life. If I let her get away with it, she'd think she could decide who belonged and who didn't. And the worst part? She already believed that. To her, I wasn't a neighbor. I wasn't a resident. I wasn't a property owner. I was just someone who didn't fit the picture she wanted for her building. The one she acted like she ran because she got herself elected HOA board president and memorized half a handbook she didn't understand. But the cops didn't know that. They only knew what she told them. And when they put cuffs on me, without checking ID, without asking a single question, I realized how fast your rights can disappear in the hands of the wrong person with too much confidence. That wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a threat. Because if she could get me arrested in my own building, what was next? Would she try to evict me? Ban guests? Kick out tenants she didn't like? Accuse delivery drivers of loitering? How far would she go before someone finally stopped her? And more importantly, who was going to stop her? I wasn't just another tenant. I wasn't just some quiet guy walking through the lobby. I was about to remind her who really signed the checks around here. And the difference between owning a clipboard and owning the building that I'm not the kind of guy who needs to be noticed. In fact, I've spent most of my adult life going out of my way not to be noticed. No flashy car, no big speeches, no neighborhood gossip. Just clean lines, quiet routines, and simple control over what I build and what I protect. So when I bought my first condo unit in that building almost 8 years ago, I didn't announce it. I didn't ask for recognition. I just signed the papers, took the keys, and moved in. No one knew I was the owner, and I liked it that way. The building itself wasn't luxury, but it had character. Brick on the outside, with floor-to-ceiling windows in every unit. It was old enough to have history, but not so old that you had to fight the plumbing. The kind of place where the walls were solid, the lobby echoed just a little, and the elevator groaned politely, but always did its job. I bought my second unit the following year, then a third, a fourth. Eventually, I owned 6 units outright. 3 I rented to long-term tenants, 2 I kept for business travel, and 1 I lived in. The others paid for themselves. The building gave me stability. I kept my name off every mailbox. Let the tenants list their own. Mail went to a private P.O. box. I attended maybe once or twice, quietly, under a tenant's proxy. Never needed to say much. The board was usually harmless, concerned about paint tones and light bulb replacements, the usual HOA stuff. And me? I minded my business. Didn't cause trouble. Paid every HOA fee on time, in full without fail. My daily rhythm was simple. Morning run, coffee on the balcony, a few hours working remotely from my home office, maybe some light maintenance in one of the vacant units if needed. I wore plain clothes, didn't carry a briefcase, didn't broadcast that I was the one who made sure the broken hallway lights got replaced before anyone noticed they were out. Most people assumed I was just another tenant. Some probably thought I was a visitor. And honestly, that was fine with me, because when no one sees you coming, they can't brace for what happens next. Then she moved in. Unit 504. Karen. She arrived like she was inheriting the building, not leasing it. Rolled in with a designer handbag, 2 yappy dogs, and a voice that didn't understand the concept of indoor volume. Within 24 hours, she was already posting in the community app. Just moved in, already noticing a few things that need fixing. Anyone else concerned about how the lobby rug smells like mold? That rug had been professionally cleaned the week before. Also, I've seen several people entering the building without key fobs. Security issue? She meant food delivery guys. We need to talk about enforcing noise after 8 p.m. Some of us work early hours. Funny, considering she was the loudest voice in the building by noon. She joined the HOA board within 2 months. Claimed she was doing it for the community. Said she had ideas. Said the place needed active leadership. By month 3, she was issuing warnings. Taped notes on doors. Passive-aggressive posts about trash bins and hallway clutter. She even tried to ban one guy's service dog, until someone showed her the federal law. But the real shift came when she started patrolling the lobby. She called it monitoring. I called it stalking with a Starbucks. She'd stand near the elevators with a clipboard, questioning anyone she didn't recognize. Do you live here? Which unit? Are you with someone? Who buzzed you in? Sometimes she asked with a smile. Other times, she didn't. The first time she spoke to me, I had just walked in from the gym. Sweats, towel around my neck, headphones still on. I nodded politely, went for the elevator, and she stepped in front of it. Excuse me, she said. Can I help you? I blinked. Nope. Are you visiting someone? I reached for the elevator button. I live here. She narrowed her eyes. Oh, which unit? I didn't answer. Didn't need to, but I could see the gears grinding in her head. I wasn't on her list. I wasn't in her internal HOA fantasy spreadsheet of who belongs where. That made me a threat, a question she couldn't answer. And Karen hated unanswered questions. From that day forward, I became a target. Subtle at first. She'd accidentally let doors close in my face. Forwarded package complaints with my name on them, even though I'd never missed a pickup. Sent a warning to the resident of Unit 4C, mine, claiming my recycling wasn't sorted properly, even though it was. Still, I didn't push back. Not yet. But I started documenting, because I knew where this was going. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know what I owned. And she didn't realize that every little power play was writing her a check she wouldn't be able to cash. She thought I was just some guy with a gym bag and a bad attitude. But I was the owner of 6 units in that building. And soon, she'd find out the hard way what happens when you try to gatekeep the wrong person's home. It was a Tuesday. Quiet. Just after 9 a.m. The kind of morning where the building hums in that comfortable midweek silence. No trash pickup, no maintenance noise, just a few elevator dings and the occasional scent of brewed coffee drifting from someone's cracked door. I had just stepped into the lobby after checking on one of my rental units. Simple errand, adjust a faulty thermostat, drop off a new filter. I was wearing jeans, a hoodie, carrying a reusable grocery bag with some tools inside. It took less than 10 seconds for Karen to pounce. She emerged from the corner like a lioness who spotted a gazelle out of place, clipboard under one arm, phone in the other, lips pursed so tight they could have cut glass. Excuse me, she said sharply. I looked up. Morning. She stepped in front of me. Where are you going? I paused. The elevator. Do you live here? I blinked, confused. Yes. She looked me up and down. Which unit? I said nothing. Just stared. I didn't owe her an explanation. She wasn't security. She wasn't staff. She was a neighbor, technically, and a nosy one with a self-appointed badge. She didn't like my silence. You're not on the resident directory, she snapped. I've never seen you before. I've lived here longer than you, I said calmly. Then prove it. I held up my key fob and pointed to the mailbox wall, where 6 boxes had no names, just numbers. You're not supposed to be here, she said, stepping back and raising her phone. Karen, I'm calling the police. I stood there stunned. No, you're not, I said. Oh, yes, I am, she replied, already dialing. You're trespassing, and I have the right to question who enters the building. This is private property. It's my property. Then you'll have no problem explaining that to the officers. She turned away, put the phone to her ear, and raised her voice instantly. Yes, hello. There's a suspicious individual in our lobby. He refuses to identify himself. He's acting aggressive. I don't feel safe. My heart started to race, not because I was guilty, but because I knew how this looked. Hoodie, tool bag, refusing to respond to an angry, dramatic woman with a clipboard and fake authority. And just like that, reality snapped into place. She wasn't just posturing. She wanted this. She wanted me humiliated. The police arrived within minutes. 2 officers. 1 male, 1 female. Calm faces but focused. Karen greeted them like she'd called in backup during a war. "There he is," she said, pointing at me like I was a broken window. "He's been wandering the halls. He refuses to say who he is. I think he might have tools. Check the bag." I stayed still, arms at my sides. "Sir," one officer said, "do you live in this building?" "Yes," I replied. "Can you provide ID?" "It's upstairs. I was doing maintenance on my own unit." "Which unit?" "4C. Can anyone confirm that?" "I can get my ID." "Sir, we're going to need to detain you while we verify your identity." Karen stood behind them, smirking. It wasn't about rules anymore. It was about the show. They cuffed me. In front of the elevators. In front of the security cameras. In front of Karen, who immediately pulled out her phone to record the moment with a satisfied sigh. They escorted me out like a criminal. I wasn't yelling. Wasn't resisting. I just kept repeating the same phrase. "You're making a mistake." Because they were. Because they didn't ask the right questions. Because she lied and no one challenged it. I spent 6 hours in a holding room. By the time I was released, after confirming my identity, verifying property ownership, and explaining that I not only lived in the building but owned 6 units, the officers were apologetic. But apologies don't erase the feeling of zip ties on your wrists in your own lobby. When I returned that evening, Karen was outside walking her dogs like nothing happened. I didn't speak, didn't look at her, but she sure looked at me. Same smug smile. Same I-1 posture. As if getting someone arrested meant she'd solidified her place as queen of the HOA. As if ownership didn't matter. As if she had power now. And maybe in that moment, she did. Because when someone's allowed to do that to you once, what's to stop them from doing it again? The HOA wasn't going to reprimand her. They loved her fake law and order routine. The board was more interested in planter aesthetics and newsletter fonts than they were in preventing racial profiling and wrongful arrests. I was on my own, but I wasn't shaken, because I had something stronger than petty rules and fake power. I had proof. I had legal standing. I had everything I needed to burn her little kingdom to the ground, on paper. And that was the last day Karen thought she ran that building, because she forgot one crucial detail. I wasn't just a tenant. I wasn't just some guy with a gym bag and keys. I was the one who signed the contracts. I was the one who paid the taxes. And I was the one who was about to make her wish she'd never open her mouth in that lobby. Let me know when you're ready for Section 5. Third major topic: investigation, exposure, and takeover, where the protagonist flips the story, reveals the truth, and takes back control of the building, and Karen's illusion of power collapses publicly. Karen may have gotten the last word in the lobby that day, but she had no idea that I was just getting started. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to post online or start a shouting match in the hallway. That's Karen's language, drama, spectacle, dominance. Mine? Documentation, deeds, contracts, law. The kind of language that doesn't need volume to leave a mark. The very next morning, I call my attorney. She's handled my real estate matters for years. Level-headed, unshakable, and fiercely organized. I told her what happened, every detail, from the accusation to the arrest to the HOA's failure to intervene. And before I could even finish the sentence, she was already pulling the building's ownership documents from our shared archive. "You want this public or quiet?" she asked. "Both," I said. "Got it." The first step was filing an official complaint with the HOA board. We didn't go in angry, we went in surgical. I submitted a letter, notarized and dated, outlining the timeline of Karen's harassment. I attached screenshots from the building's security feed, timestamp proof of her intercepting other residents, including elderly tenants and visiting guests. My own arrest. That came with the police report and my release documentation. But what really sealed it? Ownership. I included a formal declaration that I owned 6 of the building's 34 units. That I was a silent partner in the property management LLC that maintained the structure. That Karen, technically, had just called the police on one of her landlords. The board scheduled an emergency meeting. Karen didn't see it coming. She thought it was about safety or updating lobby rules. She even emailed out a self-congratulatory notice that morning titled "A Stronger Community Starts with Boundaries." I showed up to that boardroom with my attorney, my portfolio, and an entire presentation. Karen showed up with her clipboard and a scarf that probably cost more than my retainer. The board president opened the meeting and asked if I'd like to speak. I stood, and I introduced myself, fully, for the first time. My name is Redacted. I'm the owner of Units 4C, 3D, 2B, 6A, 5B, and 3A. I've lived in this building for 8 years. Paid dues on time, never missed a fee, never made a single complaint. A few board members blinked. One whispered something to another. And last week, I continued. Your HOA president had me arrested in the lobby of my own building, without asking who I was, without verifying my identity, and without knowing that I have more equity in this structure than half the board combined. Karen scoffed. She wasn't acting alone, I said. She was enforcing her own ego, not HOA policy. And I have proof. Then I showed the footage. I'd requested building security logs under the Fair Resident Protection Clause. Took me a few days to process, but it was worth every frame. There she was, Karen, blocking guests, grilling delivery workers, taking unauthorized photos of tenants walking dogs. One video showed her shouting at an Uber Eats driver for lurking when he was literally checking a building number on his phone. Another clip, Karen standing nose-to-nose with a quiet elderly man who'd lived there for over a decade, accusing him of bringing in strangers just because his daughter visited once a week. And finally, the piece de resistance, Karen pointing at me in the lobby, dialing 911, while I stood still, calmly holding a reusable grocery bag. I ended with a still image, me in handcuffs, mid-arrest, with her standing in the background, smiling. The room was silent. Even the board members who usually rolled their eyes at unit owner drama were suddenly rigid. You could feel the shift. You could see the gears turning. For the first time, they understood this wasn't about property lines or parking rules. This was about abuse of power. The board president cleared his throat. Karen, do you have anything to say? Karen stood up, shaky but defiant. I was doing my job, she said, keeping the building safe. He refused to identify himself. That's not harassment, it's vigilance. My attorney spoke up. Did your job include detaining residents without cause? Profiling visitors? Filing false police reports? Karen didn't answer. She just crossed her arms and sat down. The board voted that night. Motion passed. Karen was to be removed from the HOA board effective immediately. Her access to the building surveillance feed was revoked. She was fined for filing a false incident report, with the amount distributed toward community legal fees. An official letter of apology was issued on behalf of the board, not just to me, but to all residents affected by her unauthorized surveillance practices. And finally, new language was added to the building policy. No resident, regardless of board position, has the authority to detain, interrogate, or otherwise impede another resident without legal cause. Violations may result in board removal, fines, or legal action. That clause? I wrote it myself. The fallout was fast. Within a week, Karen's dogs were barking behind shuttered blinds instead of being paraded around like tiny mascots of her self-importance. Neighbors who once looked unsure now nodded to me in the hallway. A few even said thank you. One elderly couple left me a note on my door. Didn't know who you were. Now we're glad you're here. I didn't need the recognition, but I appreciated the honesty. Karen tried to save face at first. Said she stepped down for health reasons. Said the board had turned political. But her reputation was shot. People knew, not because I spread it, but because the facts were too clear, too well documented, too real to ignore. A few months later, her unit went up for sale. Quietly. No flyers. No farewell emails. Just a line on Zillow and a moving truck that came before sunrise. She didn't say goodbye. I didn't need her to, because when she walked out those doors for the last time, she passed the lobby she once claimed to control. And above the security desk was a new plaque. I had it installed personally, engraved in clean brass. Welcome to building name. Ownership is not always visible. Respect isn't always loud, but both are earned. Some people want to win the argument. I'd rather win the room. So once the dust settled, after Karen's removal, after her half-hearted denials, after she packed her life in a cardboard and left the building like a disgraced politician slipping out the back door, I got to work. Not out of spite, out of principle. Because when someone tries to erase your presence in a place you helped build, you don't just return to normal, you redefine it. The lobby used to be a functional, forgettable space. A beige couch, a worn rug, 2 plastic planters, and a coffee table that always seemed to have outdated community newsletters no one read. So I funded a redesign. Quietly, privately. No fanfare. Just a contractor I'd worked with before and a vision I sketched out one weekend with a cup of black coffee and a pen. We replaced the carpet with polished tile. Swapped the furniture for clean, modern pieces that actually matched. Installed new lighting that made the space feel open, alive, welcoming. Even added a fresh coat of deep green paint to the entry wall. Elegant but grounded, the color of a place that knew its worth. And on that wall, a frame. Simple. Walnut wood. Satin glass. Inside it, a printed, certified copy of the deed to my first unit. The one I lived in. The one I was arrested trying to reach. Beneath it was a small bronze plate. To all who pass through these doors. Ownership isn't loud, but it remembers. A few residents didn't notice right away. Others paused to read. One woman, who'd once watched Karen scold me about suspicious hallway traffic, smiled when she saw the plaque. Subtle, she said. I nodded. But clear. That's what I was after. Not revenge. Not power. Clarity. Because Karen's mistake wasn't just in calling the police. It wasn't just in assuming I didn't belong. It was in believing that a position, an HOA badge, a board title, a clipboard, meant more than ownership. She thought visibility meant control. But I was never looking to be seen. I was looking to last. The board, for once, learned from its mistake. They updated the bylaws, drafted a new policy called the Resident Verification Clause. It was short, elegant, bulletproof. No individual, regardless of board position or tenure, may police or question other residents without direct legal cause or security clearance. Residents are presumed to belong unless proven otherwise. That was the real win. Not Karen's departure, not the framed deed, but that line, those few words that made it impossible for anyone like her to ever pull that stunt again. Because people like her don't just vanish. They replicate. They come in waves, different faces, same audacity. So I helped the building prepare for the next one. Weeks passed. The building settled into its new rhythm. The new lobby furniture held up. No more angry notices on doors. No more whispered power trips in the hallway. The neighborhood app went back to what it was supposed to be, people asking for jumper cables and borrowing sugar. Every so often, someone would ask if I'd ever thought about running the HOA. I always said no, not because I didn't want the power, but because I already had what mattered. I didn't need to chair a meeting to make change. I didn't need to vote on paint swatches or hallway scents to know I had impact. I'd already drawn the boundary, and this time, no one was crossing it. I never saw Karen again. Not in person, anyway. But her name came up once on a housing forum. Someone posted about an open house a few neighborhoods over. Said the former owner had issues with neighbors and left suddenly. No comments. No follow-up. I didn't need to read more. Her story had ended exactly the way it began. Loud, wrong, and alone. As for me, I still take the elevator most mornings. Still with the same hoodie. Still carry the same grocery bag with tools. I don't need anyone to recognize me as the guy who owns half the building. Because they already know. Not because I told them. Because they remember what happened. They remember who stood calm when the cuffs came out. They remember who walked back in stronger than he left. And they remember what now hangs quietly above the lobby entrance. A brass plate and a deed that remind every single person who walks through that door exactly who belongs here.